And welcome back. Fujifilm's Clay X Summit 2024 has come to an end, and I wanted to share a quick reaction video on what was presented today. Now, we all knew pretty much everything about what was going to be presented thanks to the great work that Fujifilm does, and cheers and kudos to Patrick for the huge work that he's doing. But I still wanted to wait to see the event and what they were going to say, and what they were going to tell us on those products before recording this video and sharing it with you. Because I still think that regardless the fact that we all knew everything about these products, there is still some that needs to be said. And overall, what I gathered from this summit is that Fujifilm has kind of righted the ship in the right direction, because they're focusing now on products that are compact, lightweight, hybrid, and with competitive prices that undercut the competition sometimes by a huge margin without cutting that many corners. Actually, without cutting any corners except for the one camera that got launched today. But without any further ado, let's go talk about each one of these products. The XM line has been forgotten for a long time. And today, with the XM5, Fujifilm has brought back to life this line of cameras again with a product that makes a lot of sense. But when I say a lot of sense, I really mean it. It's a product that was missing in Fujifilm's lineup. It's a product that goes in competition with other products that got launched earlier this year, and I mean the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II and the Panasonic S9, and it undercuts them in price, and it surpasses them in performance and in general features that you get out of these cameras. Because an X-Trans camera that is sold at $799 US is something that is basically unheard of, at least in the last 5 or 6 years, probably more. And it's a camera that targets a specific audience. That audience is content creators that want a very compact, very lightweight camera that can get them a very good video without being too complicated and too cumbersome to use. And this camera does that with a sensor that is still being used by more costly and more complete Fujifilm products, such as the XS20. However, in order to go below the $800 price tag, they needed to cut some corners with this specific product, which means this camera doesn't have any viewfinder, it doesn't have the image stabilizer, which may be problematic for some, but we're gonna see that there's a solution for that. And also, the resolution of the rear screen is not the highest that Fujifilm has in their lineup. Other than that, however, they're not like making this camera less powerful than its siblings. It's got all the features that the XS20 has, meaning 6K open gate up to 30 frames per second, 4K up to 60 frames per second, although with a small crop, Full HD up to 240 frames per second. And it's also got these modern screen interface, the vlog mode, the subject showcase mode, and it's also got a very simplified on-screen menu that should make everyone's life, especially those that are not super technical, it should make their life very easy. On top of that, they also do something that I've never seen before, which is even if you keep the camera horizontal, they use the center portion for vertical video. They can use the center portion for vertical video using the full HD resolution that you get by cropping the 6.2K open gate. So you get pretty much a mini XS20 enhanced in some things in a super compact body that is Also full of controls, which I did not expect. Of course, they're all crammed in a small body, which makes them probably a little bit less easy to use than you would do on an XS20, but still, you have them. As I mentioned, this camera has sound compromises, but similar cameras like the Sony ZV-E10 comes at a much higher price with the same compromises. Also, from a design standpoint, Fujifilm adds the divisive film simulation dial, which in this camera has even more sense than it had on the X-T50, and it's got a brand new 3 microphone layout, which allows you to go for taking all like a 360 capture of the sound, or you want to go just frontal, or just the back of the camera, or just front and back, cutting all the ambient noise. So it should be a nice way. However, since they know that internal microphone cannot be the best, they didn't skimp on giving you all the controls that you need. You have a microphone jack on the back of the camera in a very, very interesting position. That position is perfect because you don't have a viewfinder, so it's not going to get in the way, and you're not going to have cables going all over the camera. And also, you have your headphone jack, so you can record and you can monitor your audio. It's a very, very interesting camera. Last but not least, despite being this small, you get the joystick to control your autofocus. So you get a very, very complete camera that, of course, doesn't have the viewfinder, but the viewfinder for the target that this camera is shooting at is not that important. And they didn't cut corners from a performance perspective. You also have, they didn't go the only electronic shutter mode. They still kept the mechanical shutter. So if you're shooting pictures, you don't have to go on the electronic. You just can keep the mechanical shutter and so decide when to use one and when to use the other. It's something that other cameras haven't done. They just went all for electronic shutter. And those cameras sold at a much higher price. Like this camera crushes the Panasonic S9. Yes, that is a full frame camera and all the blah, blah, blah. Full frame is the best sensor ever, regardless of anything. I don't believe that. This camera does basically what the S9 does, although the S9 has some nice features for video, but I think those are for more experienced users. For the target of this camera, those features are not going to be that important, and it does it at basically half the price of the S9. And it does it $200 less than the ZV-E10 Mark II. And so it's a very competitive camera that if the tracking autofocus works nice, it's gonna convince a lot of smartphone users to go towards something better, something higher quality that allows them to be more deliberate with what they're doing. And I believe this camera is gonna sell like hotcakes because of the price, because of the size, because of the weight, because of the colors that you get out of the camera. You don't have to then go at your computer and fix your video or your photos in post. You can share them as they are. And in general, it's a camera that is going to convince a lot of people to move towards Fujifilm's system. The camera is also going to be sold with the 15 to 45mm kit lens for $100 more, and that lens makes a lot of sense because it's stabilized, which is good for the camera because that camera is not stabilized. And it also, despite being very cheap, it's also a power zoom and it performs optically way better than the construction, which is cheap, and the kit name would suggest. So the camera on its own, but also especially the kit with the 15 to 45 at $899, it's going to be a fan favorite for a lot of people. I am sure about that. I also see this camera, it's not a camera that is for me for the most part, but it's a camera that I see very good in the hands of professional or YouTuber as a second or third camera because it's that cheap that you can afford to purchase it and then leave it in your studio as a third camera, or like top-down shots that you don't want to fiddle with the camera all the time. You can leave it there. When you use it, you use it. When you don't, you don't. So in general, stylish, small, lightweight, inexpensive camera, which is very, very powerful at a bargain of a price. That this camera is going to sell like hotcakes, as I said. There's definitely a smart release from Fujifilm. The new 500mm F5.6, it's the longest telephoto lens that we now have in the X mount. And this lens is probably the most important release of today's show, not because of the price, not just because of the price, but because it fills a gap that was a pretty huge gap in the Fujifilm lineup. Because yes, the 100 to 600, the 150 to 600 is a very good lens. It's an exceptional lens. You see it there. But also it's a f8 lens when you get to 500 or 600 millimeters, which nowadays with good high ISO, it's not a big deal. However, for someone who's willing to live off of wildlife, f8 is not going to be enough, because when you're shooting at dawn or at dusk, f8 becomes too dark. Your ISO need to go too high to get a decent shutter speed. This lens, the 500mm f5.6, it's a red badge lens and offers you a stop faster lens in a smaller and more lightweight package. And smaller and lightweight are keywords here. This lens was probably designed to be handheld most of the time, because at 1.375 kilos, I believe, it's a very lightweight lens for a 500mm f5.6. And if you think about full frame equivalent terms, this is a 750 millimeters, 762, I think Fujifilm says, equivalent lens that is f5.6. Don't get me started on the aperture equivalents. It doesn't matter. In this case, we're talking about light gathering. So it's an f5.6 lens anyways. If you consider the 800mm, the few 800mm f5.6 that you see in the market, those are much bigger, heavier, and they cost a lot of money. This lens, being released at $2,999, so below the $3,000 threshold, is incredibly competitive. And this lens is going to pair decently, I guess, very good with the 1.4 teleconverter, giving you a 700mm lens f8, which is basically more than a 1000mm f8 lens on full frame terms. So it fills a gap. It's not that this lens fills all the gap in the telephoto lenses. I still think they need to come up with a 400mm f4 just to make a 600 f4 equivalent, because people may need the f4. But still, this lens fills a huge gap. And if this lens sounds familiar to you, if it looks like this lens is similar to the GFX lens that got launched earlier this year, you're not wrong there. It's basically the same lens with a different mount and a different color. And I had the chance to try that lens. That lens on a 100 megapixel sensor on the GFX camera was exceptionally good. And it was exceptionally good even in the corners. Now, on an APS-C body, this is the same lens using just the center portion of the frame. This lens is going to be outstanding. I have no doubts. So that means that a lens like this, if Fujifilm finds a way to fix their autofocusing after the debacle that we've all discussed in the last months, if they find a way to fix that, this lens is going to be exceptional. It's going to work exceptionally good for wildlife photography. I am also thinking about giving away my 150 to 600 to go for this lens, but this will happen, and it will happen only when I see that the autofocus has been fixed. Because if Fuji figures out how to make the autofocus work again, this lens is gonna, not this lens, but the 500mm f5.6 is gonna be an incredibly wonderful lens for this system. And then the star of the show, the brand new 16-55mm f2.8 version 2. Of course, it's a red badge lens as well. Well, this lens succeeds to the first iteration of the lens, the 16-55, which in my opinion is still one of the best zoom lens that Fuji has ever produced. So it's not that we needed an update to the lens for image quality purposes. That lens is still exceptionally good. So when updating this lens, Fujifilm focused on what needed to be done to make this version 2 appealing even to the users of the first version. And what did they do? They made the same focal range, the same aperture, but they made it much smaller, much more lightweight, and we're talking about 410 grams versus 655. That is a huge difference. A 24 to 70 millimeters, 24 to 85 millimeters f2.8 at 410 grams is unheard of. And that makes a lot of a difference, because at the end of the day, compactness and lightweight was the reason why a lot of people went the Fujifilm way. And the old 16 to 55, although exceptionally good, was kind of a departure from that design clue because it was pretty big and heavy for an APS-C lens. So Fujifilm decided to squeeze it in a smaller form factor, in a much more lightweight form factor, and on top of that, they added a couple of things that are gonna make photographers and videographers very, very, very happy. 11 aperture blades instead of 9, so this should give us a smoother bokeh. A closer minimum focusing distance that is valid throughout the zoom range, so that means that at 55 you get a nice magnification of 0.2. It's not a macro lens, but still it's a decent magnification that you can use to go to shoot close-ups. And they finally made their first, the clickable aperture ring. So now the aperture ring goes from clickable for photography to the clickable for video if you want. And it looks like from the few video that we saw that the aperture moves in a smooth way, which is the most important thing, because it didn't make any sense to make it the clickable and then even if they clicked, it was gonna go in steps. It looks like they managed to do that. And if the image quality, it doesn't need to be better. If the image quality is the same as the previous one, this lens is going to sell incredibly well, because it gets you the lens that everyone wants, that's 24 to 70, 24 to 85 in this case, in a super small form factor, in a super lightweight form factor, in a super lightweight factor. And it doesn't cost too much. $1,199 isn't that much. If you think about the competition for, not for third-party lenses, but for OEM manufacturer, Sony, Canon, Nikon, whatever, all of their 24 to 70 f2.8 cost way above the $2,000 price range. This one basically costs half of the price of the competition. Having a 24 to 70 in this price range is a huge saving, which is gonna make the Fujifilm's X system enticing again. However, there's one thing that I want to see, and I want to see how smooth the focus transitions are, because to call this lens a hybrid lens, we need to see those smooth transition. But other than that, this lens on paper, yes, it's not stabilized, I forgot to mention that, but none of the 24 to 70 f2.8 that are being released nowadays are, so I think we gotta get used to it. And since they shrunk the size and the weight, it would only make sense that it wouldn't be stabilized. But other than that, on paper, this lens seems to be the holy grail that we were all waiting from Fujifilm. And so in conclusion, while we wait for Fujifilm to get the autofocus fixed with the firmware upgrades that they promised a couple of weeks ago, we can definitely say that this Clay X Summit has told us that Fuji is going in what I consider is the right direction. I was concerned, and you can see the video over here, and I pushed that video almost a month ago. I was concerned that they had lost their direction. it looks like they have listened to us. They have listened, not to me personally, I don't think they even know me, but they listen to the community, and they're focusing on making compact, lightweight, hybrid products with competitive prices, which in the end is what we've all asked Fujifilm to do, because this is why we went to Fujifilm in the first place. For sure, these three products are small for what they are. They're lightweight for what they are. They are hybrid with an asterisk on a couple of things that we're gonna have to see once we're gonna be able to put our hands on them. And they're definitely competitive when it comes to prices. They undercut the competition. Each one of them undercuts the competition of similar products, sometimes by a huge margin. Now, we have to see the products in real life, because on paper these work great, but we need to see how they work in real life. And however, this is still closing 2024 on a high note after months of being bashed by a lot of customers and a lot of users, some of them without even knowing what the Fujifilm system is, but let's just get that out of the way. If they fix the autofocus in the timelines that they've told us, so end of October, beginning of November, together with this product that they launched, they're gonna close the year 2024 on a very high note. And this is what they needed. They needed to go to close the year on a high note to kind of cancel the previous months of being on the edge of being considered a bad brand. That they could not afford to allow that to happen again. And I really hope they can figure everything out, because the direction they took seems to be right. And we just need to hope that they keep going that route in the years to come. That's it for today. Let me know in the comments what you think. I'm pretty sure some of you are going to have strong feelings about the camera for sure. But let's see also about the lenses. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.